Hey folks, Seth here. As we watch cities burn, statues being torn down, and calls to defund the police, if you haven't already, it may be time to think about personal protection. Guns Etc. has 10,200 square feet of guns, ammo, safes, and a staff that will work with you to find the best firearm for your situation. So stop by their huge store in Mesa or click on gunsetc.com and have access to over $400 million in firearms and accessories. And if you like my monologues, please subscribe to 960 The Patriots YouTube channel. Welcome back and happy July 20th. I was reading the newspapers today, the national papers, and our own here, and I was thinking how glad I was I don't have a syndicated column or a national column. The bulk of the columns in our national newspapers, the vast majority of columnists, have a very hard job in their craft. They have to keep writing the same column over and over and yet make it look like new work. First off, let me get to the bulk of them issue. I can't think of a single national newspaper columnist who is pro-Trump. Not one. That in itself is a sea change. I can't think of any other time where, regardless of whether the president was Republican or Democrat, not a single columnist was to be found who wasn't at least somewhere on record as being never the president. Sure, they could disagree with the president or would from time to time, but ultimately it was clear they were disagreeing with love, and some of them would end up voting for the guy. I can't think of any other time where even a columnist clearly situated in the opposite party as the president didn't write a good word here and there, praising some policy or another for a president they didn't or don't vote for. But I don't care too much about Democrats saying good things about Republicans. As Shakespeare put it, don't trouble the poor with begging. I find it a watershed that not even a Republican or soi-disant Republican or conservative columnist in a national paper hasn't said they were never Trump. Now, before people say that's the press for you, that's the media, it's not. It's new and it's different. You could always count on at least a handful of columnists at the bare minimum to be supportive of the president in an election. Consider, I crunched some numbers. 138 million people voted in the 2016 election. Donald Trump garnered nearly 63 million of them. Think, 63 million voters, and not one national newspaper has a columnist that agrees with any of their decisions, and instead rather thinks not only those voters wrong, but mostly, in fact, racist. It's not just that Trump supporters were wrong, but they had to be wrong-headed. We see again writers today saying if you vote for Trump, you are racist. They do. They do spend time on Twitter. Read and listen to what they say. They truly believe Trump voters deplorable, racist, sexist, xenophobic, and the like, from Hillary's definition. It's an awful lot of racists and sexists and xenophobes, especially for a presidential candidate who won more votes than any other Republican candidate ever. Consider that again, Donald Trump won more votes not only just than any other Republican candidate for president, and not one national newspaper can find a columnist that supports him. By the way, among the 63 million votes are 1,500,000 African Americans. They too must all be racist, sexist, and xenophobic. 4,200,000 Latinos voted for Donald Trump too. Consider that, nearly 6 million African American and Latino voters, racist, sexist, xenophobic. I thought of this today as I was reading Charles Blow in the New York Times especially. Doesn't matter Charles Blow's issue today, his issue du jour, as Barry Weiss, the former Never Trump columnist at the New York Times, put it. Quote, we can assure ourselves of job security and clicks by publishing our 4,000th op-ed arguing that Donald Trump is a unique danger to the country and the world. Close quote. That's why I think they have a hard job. The same tenor over and over, just plugging in a new issue by the day, or by the day the column is due, at least. Charles Blow ended his column today writing, quote, so again I must ask, where is the outrage? How is this happening? How is it being allowed to happen? Close quote. Now, there's never any introspection by these columnists because there is an endless and infinite loop these columnists assure themselves of, that all the political right is on their side, and if someone disagrees with them, or if 63 million people disagree with them, including 1.5 million black adults and almost 5 million Hispanic adults, they are simply unenlightened, not woke, deplorable, you name it. But they are absolutely wrong and just not listening to the wisdom of the columnists. There's nothing truly to be done about this. These newspapers are privately owned, and they have the right to their opinions and to promulgate their opinions any way they want. But it is interesting to me that they keep asking these questions like, where is the outrage? How is this happening? How is it being allowed to happen? Allowed to happen. As if our public policy choices in favor of Donald Trump are illegal. It's interesting because there's nothing about several things in these columnists. No self-doubt, zero. Their ideological ardency is as hard and as immovable as the Rock of Gibraltar. There's one way you know you are not in the hands of liberals. Liberals are willing to occasionally question themselves. You know, one of my favorite lines on this is from Judge Learned Hand speaking about the spirit of liberty. He said, "It's a spirit of liberty that is not too sure that it is right. The spirit of liberty is the spirit which seeks to understand the minds of other men and women. The spirit of liberty is the spirit which weighs their interest alongside its own without bias. The spirit of liberty remembers that not even a sparrow falls to earth unheeded. The spirit of liberty is the spirit of him who near 2,000 years ago taught mankind that lesson it has never learned, but has never quite forgotten, that there may be a kingdom where the least shall be heard and considered side by side with the greatest." He warned, "It is not ruthless, unbridled will. The spirit of liberalism, like the spirit of liberty, is not ruthless, unbridled will." My point about these papers and columnists, there is no liberalism, there is no self-questioning, there is no self-doubt, and with it there is an unhealthy, certainly arrogant distrust and contempt for those who disagree with them or see another vision of policy for America than they do. They have contempt for them. Charles Blow actually questions the legality of it, which is an odd thing because their whole business and profession relies on the First Amendment. That's how they operate in this country legally, with what they print, what they say, who they value and use as sources, and how they stay above and beyond lawsuits that others of us are not immune to. The First Amendment. Without it, they couldn't operate. And yet they miss or ignore the whole point of the First Amendment. For as Supreme Court Justice Brennan put it in a landmark case where the New York Times was actually the defendant and prevailed, the First Amendment was enacted because, quote, right conclusions are more likely to be gathered out of a multitude of tongues, close quote. They cited the esteemed Louis Brandeis, who wrote, quote, "Those who won our independence believed that public discussion is a political duty and that this should be a fundamental principle of American government. They recognized the risks to which all human institutions are subject, but they knew that order cannot be secured merely through fear of punishment for its infraction. That is hazardous to discourage thought, hope, and imagination. That fear breeds repression. That repression breeds hate. That hate menaces stable government. That the path of safety lies in the opportunity to discuss freely supposed grievances and proposed remedies, and that the fitting remedy for evil counsel is good ones. Believing in the power of reason as applied through public discussion, they eschewed silence coerced by law, the argument of force in its worst form. Recognizing the occasional tyrannies of governing majorities, they amended the Constitution so that free speech and assembly would be guaranteed," close quote. Put concisely, the entire purpose of the First Amendment was the belief that good ideas in a democracy or Republican form of government could and would only come from a free exchange of ideas, where the bad or lesser ideas would be exposed by the light of the good or better ideas. If this seems rudimentary to some, I apologize, but it occurred to me the largest institutions in America that rely for their livelihood and profit on the First Amendment have completely forgotten or ignored the very purpose of it. There is in them not only public discussion, there is coerced silence, the argument of force in its worst form, to use Brandeis's language, which of course must require us to point out that these columnists, working in the most elite institutions, must be, or it has to be assumed they are, the best of their class. And the best of this class simply cannot see any import or need to ever question themselves, and only question with conclusory contempt and ridicule and sometimes surprise those who think differently than they do, while never giving them the opportunity to make their case. It must require us to point out, too, that it is simply not and cannot be crazy or beyond the pale for 63 million Americans to believe that borders deserve securing, life deserves more protection, human American employment may be more important than global treaties about forecasted environmental effects, that smaller government is better than bigger government, and that public safety is more important than criminal rights. The one other thing worth pointing out to ask, as Charles Blow does, where is your outrage? How is this happening? How is it being allowed to happen? We have those questions too. We have them about a lot of things. But over the last 2 months, we've had those questions about riots, destruction, shooting sprees, attacks on police, and a triumph of wills in the streets that, left to itself, brings pure anarchy. We ask those things about actual illegality. We ask those questions, we deserve to, and we have the right to. The only difference between us asking those questions and the likes of the uniformity of national newspaper columnists and other journalists, we actually know the answer to our questions. The answer to where is the outrage, how is this happening, how is it being allowed to happen, is that these columnists and journalists have given the permission, the countenance, the sanction, the warrant, and the justification to both allow and encourage it all. This is not the work, today's journalism or op-ed writers, of adults or sophisticated or even semi-sophisticated thinkers. It's not even the work of those confident enough in their beliefs to allow other beliefs. And it's not the courage of convictions. It's the same thing every autocrat and dictator seeks: marginalization and silencing of those who disagree, all the while asking how the normal or sane could possibly disagree with them in the first place. And an expression of outrage. As Hilaire Belloc put it, the moral is that little boys should not be given dangerous toys. And we are in the midst of an awful lot of little boys. I'm Seth Leibson. The lines are open.